Now, okay, so now minimum wage update. Essentially, what it is, it's an increase to $12 an hour by July 1st, 2024, and it's a 75-cent increase per year until we get to that point. So right now, minimum wage is 7.25 and 8.25. Does anybody here pay the lower tier of minimum wage, 7.25?
A lot of our clients do.
Yes, okay.
A lot of our clients.
So there's a lot of, there's some intricacies there, and we'll get into that a little bit later in our hypotheticals. But there is, just to mention, there is a lot of, or there was a bill that was introduced that would propose to do away with the two-tier minimum wage system, because I think we're one of only 2 states in the country that have that. But that needs to be approved again in the next legislative session, as well as be approved in a general election, because it's a constitutional amendment. So this is pretty straightforward. On July 1st of each year, you just need to be mindful of the minimum wage. There is no tip credit in Nevada, so to the extent that you have any servers or employees who would traditionally make less than the minimum wage in other states, we don't do that here in Nevada. So it doesn't really affect that, but just keep in mind the rates of minimum wage will increase each year in July.
And so the other thing to keep in mind, that this new law is already effective this year. So the first tier though is the current minimum wage. So you don't have to change anything for this year, but the first change is going to go into effect July 1, 2020.
Right. Okay, so more minimum wage. A court can now, effective July 1st, 2019, so it's already in effect. A court may award back pay, reinstatement, and also attorney's fees for violations of minimum wage. I think everybody here pays minimum wage, so there's nothing to worry about. So one of the other topics, the main topics, and this relates to the two-tier minimum wage system, is right now you need to, in order to pay the lower minimum wage, you have to provide what's called qualifying health benefits. So the question is, what is qualifying health benefits? And that's been a topic of a lot of litigation over the last several years. So the Nevada legislature has stepped in during this legislative session and outlined some minimum things that your plan needs to provide. So they're all listed here. I'm not going to read them out, but they are, that's basically the minimum that your plan needs to provide to employees in order to pay the lower tier, the 7.25 minimum wage. If you don't have a healthcare plan that provides these services, you cannot pay the lower minimum wage. And we do know that if you increase people's wages from 7.25 to 8.25, that's pretty significant, right? Because if you have one employee who needs that, if they work full time in a year, that's about $2,000 a year. So if you have several employees who you need to raise to 8.25, that's a pretty significant cost to your business. So if you have any questions, of course, on whether your healthcare plan qualifies in order to pay the lower tier minimum wage, of course you could ask advanced staff. They'll walk you through it. But this is pretty straightforward in terms of what the new services need to be at a minimum.
And most plans qualify. I mean, your sort of average typical health insurance plan is going to meet these qualifications. It's nothing crazy or unique about what's in here. But there once in a while we'll come across a client who has sort of like a very weird, very low tier type of plan that might not meet that threshold.
So a little bit more. So the constitutional amendment I mentioned earlier, hopefully they remove it because the two-tier system causes some confusion, just the way that it operates. And yeah, so there's also, so last thing, there's also a proposed legislation that'll automatically increase the minimum wage anytime the federal minimum wage is increased, in addition to, I guess, after the 2024 increases take effect.
Which isn't a huge risk because the federal minimum wage has been the same for years and years and years. So I will point out, since we're talking about wages though, and you might have seen in the news, there is a lot of talk now about increasing, once again, that salary threshold for exempt employees. And that's not part of our discussion, but it's very likely to happen, and it's hopefully not going to be as significant as what we felt a couple of years ago that ended up not going through. So So if you have any questions about that, feel free to talk to us.